Hello and welcome to the Histro-Tea podcast, the podcast with lots of history and, of course,
Lots of tea.
Hi, David.
Hey, Ali.
How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It's been a while.
Well, it's been a while since we recorded. All the
Yeah.
other episodes we kind of recorded in one go. So it's been a couple of months, I think.
It has been quite a few months. More months for me to forget all the information that I once knew. I'm pretty sure my brain's turned into jelly now, Ali.
Yeah, well, that's fine because we've got Google now. So,
It's a powerful tool.
yep.
But yeah, we're going to try and do it without Google. I think.
That's the plan. That's the hope. That's the dream.
We'll find out.
Fuck.
You're right.
My sofa tugged at my hair.
No, it's because you've got baby hair.
Fine.
Like a chicken. Like a little baby chick.
Fine hair.
Just a swift wind and it's gone.
It's my
It is so soft.
toupee.
He's got very soft hair. And yeah, if you imagine stroking a baby chick, I imagine it's probably the exact same texture as his hair.
Women love it. They don't.
I mean, I love it. Is that not enough, Ali?
No, that is, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I respect you.
Thank you.
I don't even know where this intro's going.
No, it's not going anywhere. Should we take it back, bring it back to...
Let's ground it into reality. We're now going to be
Talking about-
what are we going to be talking about, David?
Right,
This is
that's a really good question.
good.
And the topic I decided we're going to talk about today is Vikings.
Oh, Vikings.
Vikings.
They're pretty good.
Everyone likes Vikings.
There's that new game about Vikings.
Yep, there is a game about Vikings.
Valhalla, is it?
Yeah,
Assassin's
Assassin's
Creed,
Creed. Valhalla. There's a TV show about Vikings.
Oh, yeah. That's a bit. I haven't watched that yet.
I don't know whether it's because I have a beard, but I also get lots of adverts on my Facebook about a company called Grimfrost. And all they advertise is...
Grimfrost, it sounds like an enemy in like a video game.
Yeah, and all they advertise
Look
is
out, the Grimfrost are coming.
Viking-themed clothes / jewelry / beard products.
Who's buying that though?
I don't know.
No one's going on a night out going, oh, let's just get my Viking attire out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people do. Some people really like that sort of stuff. Like, to be fair, the Vikings had some sick jewelry. Like, nice art styles. Like,
Yeah, but, well, I don't know.
yeah.
What else is Viking orientated? We'll probably cut some of this out and make it a bit more succinct.
Yeah, probably. Hopefully. If we don't, then we failed as editors.
Yeah.
But no, so Vikings, they're everywhere. Everyone loves them. They're real popular. You know, I mean, Marvel movies got a lot of Vikings in that with Thor.
Oh, yeah, some of the mythology.
Yeah, their mythology's made a big impact on like modern storytelling and stuff like that.
It's one thing about those films. I never really thought I'd like Thor as much. Like when Thor was coming out, I remember just being like, he'll be a bullshit character. He's probably now one of the best, isn't he?
I mean, Thor Ragnarok, I think, is hands down the best.
That was incredible.
It is the best one. Best Marvel film out there at the moment, I think. Look forward to the next one. But yeah, so Vikings are really like relevant considering that the Viking Age starts in what? 793 AD?
793.
Yeah, not even got to like the thousands yet. That's when they started.
When was Jesus about?
He
When
was
kicking?
He was kicking around like during the Roman times, when it late Roman period. So, well, he was technically kicking around 793 plus a 30, so 760-ish years before the Vikings. Quick math. Hear that, NASA? Yeah. 2 + 2 is 5. Want to employ us?
Someone employ us.
Please, so we can stop doing this goddamn podcast.
I'll do year 6 maths.
I'll do anything. Just please don't make us talk to this mic again. But yeah, so he was around, that time. So yeah, and the Viking Age is arguably people say it comes to an end. That's a word. Comes to an end in 1066. What was the big thing in 1066, Ali?
Hastings.
Yes, Ali.
0800
1066.
We're not sponsored by, but
we'd love to be.
we'd love to be. I mean, we've already given you some free advertising there. Hastings Direct. Come on,
man. You're gonna love it.
Watch them sue us somehow.
Oh,
Be like, yeah,
we don't want to be
we
associated.
didn't actually ask for that, so
Didn't give you permission to use that.
we're fining you a lot of money now.
Yeah, but we can argue as our cover version. I think we're good.
We'll lower an octave on the song.
We'll put in a sick beat in the middle of it with the editing.
Yeah.
And
That'll be fine.
yeah.
I'm sure it'll be fine. Maybe we'll remove it.
Maybe.
Then again, I doubt anyone from Hastings Direct
is going to be...
is going to be listening to this.
But if you are, sponsorship deal, great idea.
Plus.
Please. Anyway, yeah. So that is what is noted as the Viking Age, which I think is really weird because
Did it cross over with any other sort of like notable time period?
well, yeah, it's technically in the very early medieval period, but I find it weird that there's a whole age dedicated to these lads because, like, you got the Bronze Age, that makes sense. Everyone was rocking around with bronze. Then you got the Iron Age, like these big technological leaps. But the Vikings get their own age for being essentially a nuisance to the world for that duration.
It makes sense. Yeah, they went everywhere, didn't they?
They did. They went everywhere. And I suppose, like it was a big technological leap for, in some ways, that kind of inspired their rise in history, the Vikings. Because like the Vikings come from the Scandinavian countries, so far in the north where it's like icy and cold and shit. Very beautiful though, I imagine. Like, I want to go and see the Aurora Borealis.
I mean, you can actually see it. Friend of mine who I used to work with in Dublin, he used to live. His family are from like Letterkenny way, like way up north.
Dublin, that was founded by Vikings.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But so he up in here Letterkenny and up towards there. He you can see the
Aurora Borealis. I can't say that normally.
The Northern Lights. There you go.
There we go.
The
green wiggles. Yeah. The wiggly greens.
The thing in the sky that looks weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see that from there. Some parts of Scotland as well, I think.
Yeah, but I don't really want to go to that far north in Scotland. I bet it's just raining all the time. But yeah, so yeah, they all come from those sort of Scandinavian countries, and there's loads of different kingdoms in there. That make up sort of Denmark as we know it today, Norway, and all that sort of stuff. Even like stretching across the north of Russia, but they're kind of considered different enough. They were kind of Vikings, but they're different enough to be called like the Rus, which was like a slightly different sect of the Vikings. Because that's the thing, that they colonized the world, like the Vikings. They went everywhere. And it was all down to, because they lived in this place where it was really cold, like they basically, loads of people dispute what it was about, but a lot of it was either to do with a slight overpopulation in the area and they couldn't sustain themselves because there wasn't much good farmland up there because it was all bloody frozen. So they went off to basically take land that had better farming, which seemed to be always their plan, was to go out, raid, take over a place so they can have farms, which is, it's quite a wholesome side to the Vikings. It wasn't all just like blood and murder. Another reason is because Christianity was the hip new religion and it was making its waves through all of Europe, and the Scandinavians were not too keen on this. And so there was a bit of anger, a bit of fight back against this encroaching Christianity on their sort of pagan religions and stuff. And then the other reason was because they were sick shipbuilders and they were like pioneers in shipbuilding, and they came up with some really cool technology. So the long ship is, was suited to both shallow and
Is
deep
that the one
waters.
where it's like they've got oars on the side of them as well?
Yeah, they have oars. They got sails, oars. Sometimes some cool like dragon heads.
A cool 2,000 horsepower engine. They managed to pioneer that technology back then as well.
Yeah, they managed to get speedboats.
Did they refine some oils? Just like
Yeah.
we've made diesel stuff.
Yeah, we've made petrol. This is great.
This is fucking sick.
Don't need oils.
Guys, you should really be getting on this stuff.
Yeah, no one else was listening because they're like, you're pagan. We can't really be. That's witchcraft.
That's witchcraft technology.
Yeah.
You should join the Chinese with their gunpowder. We don't need this.
We
shit.
don't need this stuff. No, just for viewers at home, they didn't invent petrol. I wish they did. That would make a really interesting story. But no, so their
They
ship.
made the first lithium-ion battery.
So yeah, the ship thing. The reason why that's interesting is because it seems really simple now, but they were clinker built. So
Clinker built sounds like a child's toy, or like
it sounds like what's that Tonka truck?
the new Clinker built fucking toy from JML. Or some shit.
Yeah, so basically all it is, I say all it is, it was a big deal back then, was so a lot of ships, when they were built, they would have the panes of wood sort of side by side and then sealed, whilst the Vikings had them overlapping. And it just gave the boats like a more sort of streamlined profile, but also it gave them more resistance in like deeper waters and choppier waters.
I like flooring.
Yeah, so yeah, kind of like that. Clinker built floors. It could be your new business.
Well, I mean, they slot in together now, don't they? Like,
Yeah, but
Hardwood
these
floors.
were actually like overlapping planks, so they weren't like slotting into each other as it were, but they were actually like sort of stacked on top of each other. And also the nature of the ship, the long ship, obviously it was long because that's what it was called a long ship for, but it was also quite shallow and wide, so it just sort of stayed afloat really well. And it could be used to go inland as well as over sort of deep waters, and that's basically what gave them the ability to get out of the Scandinavian areas and go and raid and trade all over the place.
like the way I've like seen like Viking boats, like normal. I mean, you think of pirate, you think of like this honking big ship, but it's quite thin. Like the way I've seen, like, I don't know how to explain it very well, but the Viking ships are quite wide, and like they come in like quite wide, like flat bottom almost, and then they sort of like dip down a bit to like a point in the middle, as opposed to, you know, like, I don't know, like you've seen like old ships from back then. They're quite, I don't know how to explain it. They're quite,
actually,
they go
like,
quite deep into the water, don't they?
what's really funny is like very early medieval ships that came later were built really tall, which was really bad for their stability because obviously you don't want narrow and tall on the water. You want something low and wide. They used to build like towers on top of it and stuff for warfare and stuff. They were very weird. But no, so the Vikings and their long ships is what kind of like, so that, I guess that is the technological leap forward that might justify it to be an age. But yeah.
Probably being able to colonize or, you know, travel the world quite easily.
That's the thing as well, man. They travelled the world. Now they got to America. Now, everyone gives Columbus the credit, but like the Vikings got to North
Columbus
America.
was a fucking idiot. Let's be honest. He got there and thought it was fucking India.
He did. He did thought it was it. He was like, I'm going to go India, but I'm going to go this way, and then hits America and goes, I found India.
I think it might be that way. Like I've charted the constellations and shit. I feel like we might be going the wrong way. No, fuck you. It's this way. Oh look, Indians. No.
They're Native Americans. No, but I'm in India, so they're definitely Indians. Yeah, he was a numpty.
This guy's a fucking idiot. I think we should turn back now.
Idiot.
He's going to get us all killed.
Yeah, he was it was a happy accident for him. But the Vikings did it by bumping across, so they hit like
which way did they go?
They basically went north, so they went Iceland over to Greenland and then found themselves on like the north coast of America.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, the Vikings, they got to America before anyone else did. Obviously not before the Native Americans. They were there way before anyone else was. But as far as like Europeans are concerned. But yeah. And the Vikings went all the way down to like the Middle East and all around there. In fact, like there was a big empire called the Byzantians down in sort of where Turkey is now. And they were famed for having Viking bodyguards because they were so good at like fighting and stuff. They were prized bodyguards, so they went down there and got employment there. Invaded England famously, the Great Heathen Army. Sort of founded York, or was Jorvik as it was known back then.
Oh yeah, because there's the Viking place in York, isn't there?
Jorvik.
Yeah. Is that the one where I remember going like ages ago as a kid, and I remember it being like they tried to like Disneyfy it in a way.
There's like a ride.
Yeah, and there was a ride.
Yeah, I've never been.
It was like all the animatronic, but it was really shit animatronics. Let's be honest. It's not going to be like Disney level of animatronics, but they had like different scenes of like the living conditions, what it was like. They really focused on like the fake smells, and it just smelt like fucking turds.
Yeah,
the whole ride.
Yeah,
it just smelt like fucking sewage. And you're there like, oh, that's fun for like the first 20 seconds, but then when it's like the whole ride it just smells like fucking shit, and like the wood sort of smoke burning effect, and you just felt ill after about 5 minutes. You're like, this is
I've had first-hand encounters and experiences with these like so-called smell cubes, and maybe when they're first made they smell like something quite specific, but by the end of it they all just smell like burnt wood.
Yeah,
and it is quite an intrusive smell.
Yeah, especially when you sat there and it, because it's not natural smell either, it's fake, so you just get headaches really quickly.
It's like going into a lush.
Yeah, like that kind of like, God forbid anyone that works there. Jesus.
I know quite a lot of people who used to work there.
Yeah, my ex used to work there, and she used to just come home with like bath bombs and all that sort of stuff, stinking of Lush, and it used to give me massive headaches.
Oh, Lush. I thought you meant Jorvik. I know a few people that worked at Jorvik.
Oh, right, no.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I never know. Oh, no, one person that used to work at Lush. They were going to get us free massages at work, but it never happened. But no, so yeah, the Vikings established Jorvik and shit. The first ever.
Did we not have like any? We must have tried to stop them, surely.
Oh, God, yeah. But like England at the time was made up of loads of little kingdoms.
Didn't we have like a bit of arguments against Protestants and Catholics? Wasn't there a bit of a war going on between them?
There was, but that was a fair few hundred years later. That was Henry VIII.
And who were the guys that
came in? Because Henry VIII came up with the Protestant faith.
Yeah, and who was the guys that came in on their wooden stilts in Norfolk?
Clowns? I don't know.
No, they came in on the, because Norfolk, it was quite the boggy land, and they came in thinking that they could invade, and they just got, I don't know, I think that was Romans at the time.
Maybe. I've never heard of that. That is brilliant. I want to know everything about these stilt-wielding maniacs.
They came in because they couldn't get across the land quick enough.
Yeah. There's been loads of accounts of that.
Norfolk attack.
Like, that kind of bogland has been used. Because actually, funny enough, when the Vikings invade Wessex, King Alfred loses his first battle against them and then has to basically retreat and hide. And he ends up hiding in like a bogland, essentially, like in reeds and stuff. And that's where he sort of like lays low for years, waiting for an opportunity to come back and kick some Viking ass. But
I'm pretty sure the Romans were about, and it might have been the I'm thinking of a different time period. This is it, man. With history, I don't know who came about when.
I was going to say, like, because this is why I want to talk about Vikings, because I think it was you. Because as a person that knows a lot about history, like, chronology for me is pretty straightforward. But I think, was it you that thought that the Romans came after the Vikings?
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know.
Why? No, but why?
I don't know. I did really. I should be looking at the dates and like remembering that, but you kind of think, well, Romans seem, I don't know, they seem to have more that the technological side seemed to be, because they were so advanced for what they were. I guess they seem like they're on a similar timeline. Because you look at the Viking, there's nothing really apart from, like you said, the ships technologically that sets them apart. But then again, I guess technology wasn't really moving that quickly back then. It was quite a slow, few hundred years process to,
Yeah, but which I found that really interesting, because you're right. Like, if you look at the Roman Empire, you think, wow, they must have had their shit together. And then you look at the Vikings, you go, well, they live in small little villages and towns. They sail everywhere. They don't look very, like, technologically advanced. But that's kind of wrong. The Vikings had far better technology than the Romans did. They might not have had the same sort of like siege engines that you see, these huge sort of like engineering feats that the Romans portrayed, but the Vikings had certainly metallurgy wise much more advanced technologies than the Romans ever did. But also that's what happens when an empire falls, because the Romans sort of flooded all of Europe, didn't they? And then everything went tits up, and they all left, and you're just left with these big ancient ruins and things like that, and they didn't know how to pick up, they didn't know how to use it, didn't know how to work with it, so they went back to what they knew, which was smaller towns, mud huts, that sort of stuff.
Right, here we go.
Okay.
Saxons. They came over, and they couldn't quite get over, like, traverse the land.
So they made stilts.
They went through on stilts.
They made stilts. That is a terrible.
And as you can imagine, they all
fell off and died.
It was an episode on Horrible History.
Oh, was it? Back to Vikings. Away
Back
from
to
these stilted Saxons. That
anyway, we'll ignore that. We'll
probably edit
we'll
that
cut out all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, carry on.
But no. So that's kind of. I can't remember where we were. I've lost the plot. But Vikings, right? So they're sailing all over the world. They're doing some cool shit. And they're doing it all because they want farmland, they want wealth. And the first kind of like invasion for England, at least, of the Vikings was a little raid on a place called Lindisfarne. And in Lindisfarne, there was a monastery. And this monastery was filled with monks and a shit ton of gold. And the Vikings, they sail over to England because they're like, ooh, I've heard about this place. It's pretty fucking cool. And they arrive at Lindisfarne and they see this big old church filled with gold and filled with men. And they're like...
And this woman called Linda.
Oh, and Linda.
She's like a little 86-year-old woman. Welcome to Linda's farm. She's there. She's got a little stall.
So Linda wasn't there. She had gone out.
Why is it called Linda's farm?
I don't know. It's called Linden's farm. Not It's not Linda's farm. It's Linden's farm.
Linden's farm.
Anyway, so the Vikings rock up and they're like, that's a big old house with a bunch of blokes in it. Oh man, that's a shit ton of gold you got there. Can we have it? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, we're going to take it. And they're like, please don't. And they're like, well, what are you going to do about it? You haven't got any weapons. And so they just kill everyone and take all the gold. And they're like, shit, this is well easy. It's all of England like this. This is going to be great. And they go home and they tell all their mates about it.
This reminds me of Age of Empires. That one friend that was so good at it. You just have set up a little farm by now. You may be thinking about creating your army on the game. And then all of a sudden your mate with a honking army comes along with fucking elephants and shit, starts raiding you. Is that what that was like?
Yeah, except without the elephants.
Right, yeah, well, obviously.
But yeah, but also England, to be fair, wasn't all like that. But you can imagine that these one raiders who have managed to finally get to England, they've gone, right, England, great weather.
I suppose as an island, though, we kind of thought, there's not... It's a bit harder to...
Yeah, to be fair, you'd think you'd be able to keep your coasts fairly secure. But also, we were a very heavily Christian country, so there was a lot of reverence around churches, so you wouldn't feel like they need protection, because if you raided and killed the monks in a church, then you'd be damned to hell. And most people sort of went, that's a bad idea. I don't want to be damned to eternity in hell. Yeah. So I'll probably just not do that. And so you wouldn't expect them to put guards and stuff around these things.
I've heard of this hell, and I'm not a fan.
No, it's Bernie. It sucks. I want to be in heaven with clouds and shit. It sounds soft. Sleeping on a bed of brimstone or sleeping on a bed of clouds.
I heard they've got really good Wi-Fi in heaven as well.
The best Wi-Fi. We're talking 8G.
Okay. Whereas Wi-Fi in hell is just BT open zone.
No. I remember being at uni.
Everyone's connected to it.
I did not have internet at certain points of university. And
what did you do?
I went to cafes and used BT open zone.
How depressing.
And it was miserable. It was miserable, especially with if I bought a game or whatever, I need to download an update for it. It was like, oh great, here we go. I'm going to spend an entire day.
As if you went to Costa Coffee
Yeah.
to download games.
I'm going to spend probably a small fortune on coffee to be able to stay in this cafe. And
Where was it in relation to your house or flat?
probably like a 10-minute walk.
Oh, okay.
It was pretty close.
So it wasn't like downstairs where you could like maybe like connect to the Wi-Fi.
No. It was a while away. But yeah, no, BT open zone only would be hell. You are right.
Yeah.
So you can understand if that's what you're looking at.
I mean,
You're not going to be raiding no churches.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll be like, listen, sir, I don't think it's a good idea. I'm pretty happy with the gold that we have.
Exactly. You're going to leave it be. But the Vikings, being pagans, had no concept of God's wrath and all this sort of stuff. And they just saw a very, very, very wealthy sort of place completely unguarded. And they were like, this is a great idea. So they go back home and they're like, guys, just saying, there's a big house over there full of gold. No one was guarding any of this gold. So that's all great, right? Plus, England, great weather. It's not as cold. Loads of farmland that we could use.
Fertile land, yeah.
Exactly. And they're like, well, I feel like this is like, a sure win. And they gather people up to go and return and start, Vikinging. Which leads me to another point, is technically these people were not known as Vikings. Or certainly not as a nation, if you know what I mean. Like, so to call someone a Viking is incorrect unless they are actually being Vikings, which is like going raiding and stuff.
But they were.
They were like Danes or Norwegians or whatever they identified as.
Yeah, but they were.
It's like if I asked you, who are you? You're Ali.
Yeah.
And you do a job. Like, do you know what I mean?
No, I don't.
Like, calling all people of the Scandinavian
wait a minute,
areas.
You said Vikings are the pillaging and and taking kind, but they were doing that, so surely they were right in calling them Vikings.
Yeah, the ones that were raiding. Yeah,
but all the people back home, the Norwegians,
that'd be like everyone saying that they're.
I thought that. Yeah, to be fair, I never really thought about it like that, but. Because when you think of Vikings, you think of the guys in big ships coming over with big beards. Big bushy beards. And, nice blonde and blue hair coming over.
Blonde and blue hair?
Blonde and blue eyes. There we go. Blonde and blue eyes. Blonde and blue hair. I mean, they could have had blue hair. What were their dyes like at the time?
Pretty good.
Oh, there we are then.
Like, that's another thing, is like, so one of my biggest gripes with the Viking TV show is that
they didn't have enough blue hair and I was miffed.
No, they were like, everyone wears, all the Vikings wear brown. Everything's brown. And it's like, that couldn't be further from the truth. The Vikings loved colours. If you had money, you were showing that shit off by dyeing everything a bright, awesome colour with great patterns, with tons of jewellery and gold. Like, they were really, really like.
It's like purple is quite a regal colour, isn't it?
Purple was a regal colour for a very long time because it was incredibly expensive to make as a dye. It's why no national flags have purple in them, bar from a few that were made sort of in the sort of 19th, 20th century.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's a few countries around today that do, but they were only founded like 100 years ago. But that's why you don't find it. Because if you have to replicate that flag everywhere and it's got purple in it, you're fucked. It's going to cost you so much bloody money. So yeah, purple and blacks were the two of the most like rich colours. And that continues to go on throughout like medieval period, until they could synthesize these dyes. They were making dyes out of actual natural resources. So being able to like find these resources and manufacture them was really expensive. So if you had money, you were wearing colourful stuff. We're talking bright reds, greens, blacks, purples, yellows.
Wouldn't that just put you on the map though to be like picked on?
Everyone was doing it, Like if you were poor in the Viking area, then obviously you weren't running around. You're probably wearing like undyed clothes or red clothing because red was the easiest dye to make.
Red,
yeah. Red was the cheapest.
Where'd they get that from? Like berries or?
I don't know off the top of my head. It could be berries. It could be something to do with blood. It could be a bit of both.
Oh God.
But no, red. So red was a really cheap dye to manufacture. I don't think it was blood. I think I'm just making that up. But
There's a lot. I don't know. Because there's those bloody red berries you get here. You know, when you're a kid, but they're always in like schools where they're like, don't eat them.
oh yeah, they're poisonous, and someone always eats them.
You pick them up, put them on your hand, and they're just like, it's just red for the rest of the day.
Yeah. So there's loads of different ways of making like red dyes.
Don't quote us on this. I don't know if that's actually how they did it.
Also,
we're speculating.
Do not eat those berries if you're listening, because they are bad. They give you stomach aches. Anyway,
or give it a go. Anyway, you never know. You might be.
I do not condone this message. But so Vikings were super colourful, and they were wearing all sorts of stuff, you know, showing off their wealth, like any nation was at the time, you know, through jewelry and colourful clothing. So they've gone over, they've raided this place, they've gone like, this is great. They go back home, they tell all their mates about it, and they're like, well, that sounds
it'd be rude not to.
It'd be rude not to invade, and
rude not to take all their shit.
Yeah, take their land.
If anything, we're teaching them a lesson that they should protect their shit.
Yeah,
because we're protecting our shit.
And so they head over and they invade. So you've got like a lad called Uber.
Eats.
Uber Eats.
What do you want to get?
Oh, I don't know. Fancy.
We're just speaking about food now.
No, so there's a Viking called Uber, and him along with some other of his friends go over to England, and they start attacking England. Now, the reason, like, you'd think like England would mount a defense, wouldn't they? And they certainly kind of tried, but they were separated in loads of different nations or little kingdoms. So like the big names were like Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, Kent. I think East Anglia was another one. And so they were all kind of looking out for their own, and they were kind of like fighting each other for land and stuff. So they weren't too united. So when the Vikings rock up, they hit in Northumbria, and they go to town, and they love it, and they go raiding and destroying, and then they settle in York, where they called it Jorvik, and then they start to essentially make their own country within England because they defeat the Northumbrians. And they they could sort of create what is known as Danelaw, which was like this big sort of swath of land in the north of England, which is basically Viking land now. So it was like a colony or So they colonized the north of England, and then they sit there for a while, like farming and having a great time. Things only go south for them when they try and take Wessex down south, because I think they beat Mercia as well. But no, so
they were pretty ruthless, Sam. They weren't like fucking about. They kind of went, right, let's go in. So did they attack all from one position and sort of spread out, or did they like?
Yeah,
because we're theoretically an island and not a very big one, so it wouldn't take them long to sort of navigate around it a little bit, especially the south of England, because you could drop off a few guys in Norfolk, go around to Essex, go around, you know. Yeah, no,
they all basically hit from the north because again, it's easy today to get an understanding of like a land with a map and stuff. They didn't have maps, so they would have been going off the first encounter, and so they would have been following the same routes as told by other sort of explorers. So they all came from and hit the north of England first.
They didn't have like Google Maps or anything?
They didn't have sat-nav.
Oh, shit.
No, the way they would navigate was through using sort of, you know, standard navigation stuff like stars and shit like at nighttime, but also through birds. So typically when you were sailing at that time, this is why the Vikings
bunch of Vikings followed a few fucking pigeons.
Yeah, because like back in the day, like when you sailing, you rarely kind of went off into the deep sea and lost sight of the land, because that was dangerous and you didn't know where you were. But these guys were basically, you know, desperate or brave or stupid or all three.
Or both.
Yeah, and that's why they hadn't, you know, seen England for a while. They hadn't discovered it yet, and so they go over. But to find out if they're near land, you know, if they can't see land, they'll have crows and ravens and stuff on their ship, which they would just like throw up in the air, and they would watch where the bird flies.
That's so sick.
Yeah, so if the bird flies in a direction and doesn't come back, then it means there was land in that direction. If the bird comes back, it means that they're in the middle of fucking nowhere, and they just need to keep on going until that bird flies off and lands somewhere on land. So it was a way of navigating. There was also this weird, and again, I don't know whether this is fact or kind of one of those things that we see them write about a lot, but we don't really understand. And it's what they referred to as like a sunstone. And it seemed to be some sort of stone that regardless of the weather could essentially see through the clouds and tell you where the sun is. So you'd sort of hold it
Right,
out.
David, you're now going on to the realm of
Magic.
yeah, like this is like some YouTube late at night. I've gone down a YouTube rabbit hole, and now I've like aliens, yeah. Although no, to be fair, there are like the film material you can get. You know, when you look at full eclipses and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we kind of...
You can use that to look through the cloud almost, because it mutes everything, like all the surrounding light. And you can just vaguely just see the...
So that's what they think it was some sort of stone that had that property that allowed them to see the vague direction of the sun, which would then enable them to have a sense of direction because they knew that the sun would always go down there and rise over there.
It does sound science fiction-y.
It does sound science fiction-y. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, it might... Because the problem with a lot of the accounts about the Vikings were they weren't written by the Vikings, because the Vikings were like essentially an oral nation and culture. They would tell stories to each other rather than write things down. Though they did have their own.
They didn't have
scripture.
anything to prove.
Yeah, they had their own like rune and the ability to write, but they tend to not to. Runes were usually reserved for.
It just seemed like a nation that don't give a fuck about anything.
Yeah, well,
they kind of just like go with the flow. Oh fuck it, should we do this? Yeah, all right.
Yeah, they were kind of adventurous and they didn't give a shit. But I guess if they're struggling and they're having a bad time back at home,
Didn't take any prisoners either. They weren't like, oh, we'll use these as like slaves. No, we'll kill them all.
That's a lie.
And take.
They did use slaves.
Did they?
Oh yeah, they took slaves.
Oh right, well.
Yeah, they took slaves.
Seems clever.
Yeah. In fact, the Viking culture was based around slavery to a degree. To a degree. But it was like it was basically if you could be a free man, or you could be like I can't remember what they call them. Like I could fuck. I can't remember what the name is for their slave caste. But these were usually so they could be slaves from warfare. So they would defeat people, so they would take them and put them into slavery to work for the Vikings. They could be from trade. Which is a bit iffy in it, and they could also be from criminals, and you could fall into that class even if you were like a native Scandinavian. Like you could be a slave. It just depended on like your lot essentially, but also you weren't always restricted to being a slave for life. You could work your way out of it. You could sort of gain sort of status through marriage and things like that. So it was a far more mercurial, wishy-washy kind of slavery, but it was still slavery, so it's still bad.
So, in terms of also, this brings me to my next, because the Romans did quite a lot in terms of the infrastructure for the country, in terms of all the roads and all that kind of stuff, and some of the technologies. Did the Vikings do anything similar?
Thralls. That's what slaves are called. Thralls. Bloody thralls. Anyway, what were you saying?
So obviously the Vikings, the Romans were there before the Vikings.
Yep.
England? Yeah.
Yeah.
They helped a lot with, the infrastructure of the country, like roads and all that kind of stuff.
Aqueducts and all that.
Yeah. Did the Vikings help a lot in any of that sort of stuff, or did they just like, oh, it's pretty good nick, this country, got roads and shit? And...
Yeah, they didn't bring as much as the Romans did in that sense. They kind of just like invaded, took land, started farming there, and kind of used what was already there. So no, but they did bring a lot of stuff like culturally and trade wise and fashion wise, like
wigs.
Yeah, they bring in those ones they wear in the 1800s.
Blue coloured contacts.
Yeah. They basically sold blonde hair and blue eyes to everyone. It was like a real trend at the time. But no, like the Saxons and the Vikings, like a lot of my history friends will hate me for saying this, but are ultimately very similar culturally, apart from like the Christianity side of things. But there are certain fashions and styles that start to blend between the two cultures. Because once they've established themselves there, like they stop like attacking the rest of the country to the most part. So the trade's like established and people are communicating and talking.
Were we not like mind blown by like the Vikings when they were like, yeah, so we've got like this demigod called Thor, and he wields this hammer that's called Mjolnir. And he like flies with it and shit, and he can summon the power of the fucking gods.
So there was like Christianity had taken hold in England by this point, and so to them, for the most part, anyone that didn't believe in Christianity or God were heretics and barbarians, and so they would not have been receiving these stories with great admiration.
I would have been there like, you fucking kidding me? We're worshipping this guy who can make like bloody multiply bread.
And your guy has a hammer that shoots lightning.
Yeah, like, what the fuck?
Yeah, to be fair, I would be the same, but different times, different mentalities.
What, you mean there's a guy out there that's like literally just causing mischief all the time? That's amazing.
Yeah, but I suppose when they've got a god that does all of this and more, like, so we don't need any more. We've got the one god that does everything, so get a grip. And like,
does he do everything though?
Well, he's omnibenevolent and omni everything, isn't he? Really, that's the whole point of God.
Always watching.
Always watching.
Creep.
Yeah, always watching. But yeah, so they probably weren't receiving the religious side of things very admirably. In fact, that was probably one of the largest sort of reasons of conflict with the cultures, is that they couldn't see eye to eye. Whilst the Vikings actually you kind of use this to their advantage. So because the Vikings had a far more, loose sort of nature to their religion, because they had a pantheon of gods, and they believed in different like realms and different worlds. And so when they came across the Christians and they were saying like, oh yeah, we've got this one god, they were like, sick, that guy sounds great, we'll definitely add him into like the group. And they're like, no, that's not the point. It's like, no, like your god sounds great, our gods are better, so just be careful because our gods are going to beat him up, but like he sounds great. And they would use this to advantage in the sense that, so when like Vikings were trading and stuff, if they were trading with like another Viking culture, they might rock up with their like Viking jewelry on, like Thor's hammer around the neck sort of thing, not an actual hammer, like a small version of it.
Bunch of guys just stuck to the floor.
I'm like, bloody love Thor, great lad, you like Thor, we like Thor, let's trade. But if they were going with Christians, they would like they'd just stick a cross on, and they were like, bloody love God, you love God, let's trade.
Master manipulators.
Yeah, because they didn't see it as such an integral part of their lives, I don't think.
It's weird though, because that's an integral part of them as a, I don't know, like that's just what you think about when you think of the Nords, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's much like the Greek sort of pantheons. These were like,
from what you're saying, they're just kind of like, meh, we'll take on anyone. Jesus, he's pretty sound, we'll add him to the collection.
Yeah, but I think because they were just a bit more open-minded about it, and also because their gods were not like these omnipotent, perfect beings, they were these flawed characters. I think, whilst they certainly looked for guidance from them and certainly looked for favor from them, they were far more, they held far more importance in their own deeds and their own legacies. The gods weren't always watching, they weren't controlling, they didn't have a plan. And so that gave them a sort of a sense of agency, I suppose. So being able to sort of just be flexible and incorporate whatever life throws at you, or maybe to them.
Is that why they didn't have much influence on our culture? Like, because they were obviously around for a bit.
Yeah, they definitely had a big influence. They established cities.
They could have had like massive influence because they fucking came over, took all of our shit, and we were pretty powerless to that. So surely they could have been like, like we did with our colonization, be like, you obey by our shit now.
They did.
You are part of
where they went. Well, that's a good point actually. I don't know about whether they enforced religion.
It seemed like they just sort of went, let us get on with it, and they just reaped the rewards of our fertile land, our nice climate.
Essentially, that because they weren't necessarily some of the leaders were there to gain land and fame and reward from going into battle and these great sort of deeds that would be written down in history and told in like stories for years to come. But for a lot of the sort of the average Vikings, they were there to farm. They were there for a better life. They were there to have a good quality of life. So I guess they were
I hate
less...
wearing a jumper all the time.
Yeah, I hate having to wear
Having to wear.
I look terrible in a hat. Yeah.
Not wolf skin, no, bear skin.
Bear skin, wolf skin, seal skin,
Some skin.
whatever you want, all the skin.
Animal skin.
Yeah.
Full stop, general. Probably
It's
not
a
chicken
nightmare.
skin. That's very thin. It's crispy though. It's
Ooh,
tasty.
it's tasty. Chicken skin is tasty.
Why
Could you
is it the
imagine?
best bit?
Well, skin is the best bit of every animal. Let's be honest. like, it shouldn't be.
Sorry
but
for any
tastes.
vegan listeners.
Yeah. But no, it's delicious. But yeah, so they kind of were self-serving in that sense. They weren't there to bring culture or civilization to other places. They were there to gain the rewards of what those places could offer. And if that meant incorporating a god into their lives, like a lot of the time, like Christians held it so sacred, they'll be like, okay, so can you swear on the Bible, or so can you swear on God that you're not going to like invade again? And the Vikings were like, yes. Because it meant nothing to them, and then they would be like, and then they wouldn't have to worry about it for a while until they were ready, and they were like, "Cool, we're ready to invade now. Cool, we'll invade." And the Christians
But
were like,
you
said."
Well, look, I've got the meeting minutes up from that meeting we had a few years ago, and you said, "Quote: I agree. We won't invade you. We promise.
We swear by God.
Swear by God."
Yeah. So the Vikings were quite self-serving in that sense, I suppose. But yeah. So their lasting influence on the country was definitely felt. People mixed with cultures and through love. So there's probably a lot of like Scandinavian blood flowing around, especially in the north of England. And
well, I know there's whether it's any true or not. Like sometimes see on like social media or whatever. Or it was going around when you were a kid. Remember when it's like, oh, you can tell what kind of where your ancestors came from based on your toes or something. Like if your big toe is smaller than your well, I don't know what it's called.
the second toe.
The second toe. What is that called?
I don't know.
The equivalent of the index finger anyway, but on your toe. That one.
The toe that comes after the big one.
Yeah. That one. I don't know what the official name is.
But if that's longer or something, it tells you.
Means that you're like from I don't know, like Viking descent or like.
Well, I'll tell you what, Ali. On one of my feet, I'm clearly Viking, and on my other foot, I'm not. If that's the case, but also I'll also reiterate that back at school, people used to say if your hand's bigger than the face, you got cancer, and then you put your hand against your face and they'd punch you. So I wouldn't feasibly listen to these sort of rumors.
Well, there's a lot on here, whether it's any true or not. There's a little diagram here. I just looked on Google. See? So Roman, if your feet are relatively all straight in a line. Greek, there you go.
No one has feet like that German picture. For the love of God, if you got feet like that, unless you're a witch, you do not have feet like that.
I'll bet you there's someone out there. But I don't know whether it's true.
But they used to be able to try and like tell people if they were criminals by the size of their head.
Yeah, well,
Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of pseudo science going on around that. I wouldn't listen too much into it.
Yeah, I haven't. I'm just saying. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
That was quite a thing.
Well, I'm glad you thought you were a bloody... What are you? A Viking?
Greek.
Greek. Ooh.
You know what? Maybe I should go and get one of those DNA tests done. That tell you your origin.
I'm terrified because my dad got one done. And it'd be really, really fucking hilarious if I got it done and it was different. There's always that in the back of my mind. I don't think it is. There's no reason to think it was.
It could be like recessive genes and that. Maybe.
True.
Maybe they're just rearing their head for you.
But yeah, a lot of apparently like certainly on my dad's side, it's all sort of Eastern European and Jewish.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But and I think my mum's side, from what I know, is all sort of like Irish-ish. So it would be interesting to find out, I suppose. But also, who cares? Got a long life this so far without actually knowing my ancestry. It doesn't make a bloody difference. Always find that like a bit weird, like people that find value in what their ancestors did. So okay, cool, great, but what have you done? that's more important.
I'll just be afraid of finding out that one of them was like mass murderer. or like did some bad shit.
That would be bad. Like going through your ancestry and you're like, oh, look, it's my great-great-granddad and he was the Ripper. Brilliant. Bloody brilliant. I remember once my brother told everyone at school that my dad was a murderer.
That sounds like such a brother thing to do.
Yeah. And
but the thing is,
my dad would pick him up.
Say it with such conviction and such like authority that you'd be like, oh, well, maybe he's like telling the truth.
My dad went to go and pick him up and all the fucking parents were like shying away from him. And he was like, what's going on?
Why would you believe... Right, shame on the parents, though. Why would you believe a fucking snotty-nosed kid?
All it takes
My dad's a murderer.
All it takes is a seed of doubt, Ali, to bleed into your brain. And then, because what's the outcome? My child might get too close. He might murder him. But if I keep him away, less likely to be murdered.
No, I'd befriend.
To be fair, yeah.
I'd befriend your brother. I'd make my kid befriend your brother.
That way he's safe.
That way, he's less likely to murder me kid. And maybe they can team up. Maybe it can be a... maybe they could team up, like Go Gadget or some shit.
I don't know. Anyway, where were we?
Go Gadget.
Why are we talking about my dad and why am I talking about my brother calling him a murderer? Anyway.
We're going to have to remove this.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. So.
Slight tangent. We'll be back on track in a minute.
We're back with the Vikings.
After I eat my mini yum donut. Welcome to the ASMR channel.
He's currently picking icing off his chest like the slob he is.
Oh, was there another bit? Oh, yeah, there was.
Don't own it, Chuck. You made me swallow like half a fucking thing. Right. So that was what that's kind of what the Vikings brought to, like where they went and stuff. But also they brought services, like the Vikings, like I mentioned earlier about the Byzantines.
Well, like insurance.
Yeah. Insurance in the form of, we'll back you up, bro.
Home deliveries.
Banking.
Mobile banking, that was a big thing.
Yeah.
They brought service stations on the side of the A1.
No, so like I said earlier about the Byzantines hiring them to be bodyguards, like they would sell their like warriors and services like that, like as mercenaries.
Sorry, all I'm thinking about is them setting up a fucking Costa coffee on the side of the A1. Some guy in his little cart.
Oh, brilliant. But yeah. In fact, one of the good examples of this was a chap called Rollo. Absolute legend. And
He don't have a very legend name, though. Do you know what I mean?
They named a chocolate after him. Like, come on.
Is that really named after him?
No.
No.
But it would be cool if it was. But yeah.
The thing is, I can't tell. Like, if you make a joke, I'll believe you.
I know. That's like half of like what I do is just say something with such authority that people just believe it.
Oh, well, maybe it is plausible.
I get people all the time with that. It's funny. Anyway, so he invades like northern France, essentially, and he does such a bloody good job that the French king, oh God, can't remember his name now. He was either the son or the grandson of Charlemagne, and Charlemagne was like a big deal at the time. Great name. I love the fucking name Charlemagne. Anyway, Rollo's like invading, and then the king's like, could you not, please? And Rollo's like, what are you going to do about it? He's like, tell you what, if I make you like a duke or an earl, he gave him a title basically in land in the north of France, which would then be called Normandy. And
King Charles III the Simple.
Yep, Charles III the Simple.
Why was he called the Simple?
Because he was a fucking idiot. He was a bad king. People did not like him.
Imagine that. Just everyone just refers to you as, oh yeah, that simple king.
You know Charles III. You know, the simple one. What I find really funny is that he's already noted as the third Charles. So it's not to like remember him. It's not because there was another King Charles the Third. It's because he was the idiot. And we need to remember that he was a fucking idiot. That must suck, man. If afterlife's a thing and you're looking down, you're like, what? They're calling me Charles the Third the Simple. What the
Did
fuck?
anyone call him in that while he was in power?
No, probably not.
Yeah,
They'd
I
probably
can't imagine
get
they would.
killed. But anyway, Rollo does such a good job of like raiding the north of France that he ends up going like, okay, could you stop, please? And if you do stop, I'll give you a title, I'll give you lands. You got your own little kingdom called Normandy. And in return, can you stop any more of your Viking friends from invading? And that's exactly what he did. So he sets up in north of France, he gets all this cool shit, and then him and his men just sit there as like a bit of a buffer to the rest of France to any more sort of like ambitious Vikings from the north. And then he, it goes on to establish like the Kingdom of Normandy, which would then in turn, in 1066, Battle of Hastings, invade England and conquer England, which is mad. So yeah, so that's a good example of what the Vikings did bring, and that was services in the fact that they were incredibly good at fighting. They're very like technologically, when it came to warfare, they were pretty adept. They had really cool techniques. Admittedly, it usually boiled down to two shield walls clashing against each other, but that's, but the Vikings were very good at it. And metallurgy-wise, like the Vikings were pretty advanced. They had armor such as chainmail. They had their swords, for instance,
Butted.
Butted? No, not butted. Riveted. Bloody good stuff.
I'm just checking your knowledge, mate.
You're referring back to a previous episode. I like it.
Yeah, that was our episode on armor.
If you haven't heard it,
go
listen to it. But yeah, so in that regard, they were really sort of advanced. Like the swords, like the way they crafted their swords was really unique. And I think this might help give you a slight appreciation of, whilst they might not be on the surface an advanced civilization like we think of the Romans as. So the way they would craft their swords is through a process known as pattern welding. And this is basically the result of the quality of iron ores that they could work with. So as we get better at finding more iron ore, refining it better, this practice starts to die out, other than for its aesthetics look, which we'll get onto. But basically, when you've got poor quality iron ore, it's very hard to get rid of the impurities and try and work them out. And so what they would do is they would basically fold the metal over and over and over and over again. And this would even the impurities out in the metal, so you didn't have a single weak point. So it sort of like, diluted it almost within the metal. And that enabled them to make these very, very strong blades. And this is the same sort of technique that the Japanese use for their katanas, only the Japanese do take it to a whole new level. Like the Vikings stopped at a point and were like, this is good enough. The Japanese were like,
this will do.
No, we're going to carry on folding until those impurities are so diluted that you can't tell that they're in there. Now, the aesthetic side of pattern welding,
I suppose all the impurities would, I guess, burn off as well, would they? Like some of them, or would there be another process?
Yeah,
of,
as you're
rid
forging, yeah, like stuff rises to the surface and whatnot, and it does slowly get better. But with this style of pattern welding, having some impurities was actually quite cool, because you'd get this really beautiful wavy pattern in the metal, and it just looks stunning. Like if you like Google pattern welded swords or whatever, you'll see some really beautiful works of art and warfare, I suppose. So they weren't what do you call it? They were pretty advanced in certain areas of their lives, and
oh shit!
Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it?
I wasn't really knowing what I was expecting. I thought I was going to see like, on a petrol station forecourt.
Yeah.
The petrol goes on the ground. Yeah, it's a bit swirly. I thought that's what it would be like for some reason, but no, this is like,
it's stunning. Yeah. And
that's mad.
Yeah, and their swords were typically, whilst quite long, would have quite broad heads, so they're designed mainly for cutting rather than thrusting. And again, that's partly to do with the construction with the pattern welding. Like, you needed to have a broader head. If you couldn't get a very, very fine tip to it, not one that was strong enough to sustain itself, which when we get better at making swords becomes a far more sort of prevalent pattern within blades, so that you can thrust and cut with them. They also would typically have what's known as a fuller, which will go down the center of the blade, and it's where you kind of either forge into that shape or you remove metal from the center of the blade. And that is partly to make the weight better. So if you can afford to get rid of some weight, you always would, because it makes it easier to swing around. But also, it's there for structural reasons. So if you were to look at the sword on a sort of flat axis, essentially, you get in construction those big like eye-shaped iron bars that kind of hold up the floors.
Oh, the big steel
rivet
things,
beams,
beams that go through concrete.
Yeah, so that's essentially the same idea in the sword, is that you got the white, you got the thicker bits on the end, and then you've got the thinner bit in the middle. But it creates a very sort of structurally sound sort of piece of steel. But yeah, so they were super advanced in that regard, and some of their like artistry and their jewelry and things like that are incredible. Like the detailing on some of this stuff is just insane. Like you got to think these guys didn't have, as far as we know, like stuff like magnifying glasses to see these tiny details. Yet today, when people go and look at them in museums, they're often supplied with one so they can really see those details. It's mad. It's mad. The Saxons were the same. They were incredible craftsmen, and some of the things they created were just eye-wateringly beautiful. So yeah, I can't remember where I was before.
I
went off.
trying to think. You were finishing off the sentence. Like, where were we?
We were talking about warfare. I assume about this, like that's how I ended up on the swords. Oh, that's another like misconception as well. Was with Vikings is that I think a lot of people when they think of a Viking, they think of like some guy with no shirt on, a giant fuck off axe, and like that's what they did. But they were wearing like if you had the money, you wore chainmail, you wore padded jackets. You wouldn't go into battle bare-skinned. Now, there were recordings and writings of this thing called a berserker, which was supposedly a type of Viking warrior who would essentially get hopped up on drugs and alcohol before a fight, and sometimes referred to as shield biters as well, because they were so fucking mad off their tits that they were like gnawing on their shields before a fight, and they would just be thrown into the enemy like a fucking bloodthirsty missile. But you got to remember, like I said earlier, a lot of the accounts of the Vikings were written by their enemies. And so that was a really good way of perpetuating this myth that they were barbarians and brutes when they really weren't. And also, again, for some reason, we get this like image of them being quite unkempt. But one of the most common things you find in a Viking burial is a comb, like usually a bone comb.
Oh.
Because they were super, super into make sure their hair was nice, their beards were nice. Like,
pubes were nice.
Got to make sure the pubes are nice. There's no point putting all the effort here if that's just a mess downstairs. Do you know what I mean?
That's it.
I can't attest to whether they shaved or not. But
the hair was long enough. That's how I often see it. There's like really long hair.
Yeah.
And they're often massive. Like, not fat, I mean built. That's the image I have.
Yeah, and to be fair, they probably were all quite large compared to Southern Europe, and that's just genetics.
I suppose they
that's such a broad generalization as well. But yeah, they probably were.
I suppose going around
imposing.
though, different countries robbing their shit. They're probably quite wealthy. They probably just eat whatever they wanted. Really, probably wasn't any.
Yeah, I mean, again, they if they were going around robbing shit, yeah, they're probably not doing too bad, taking what they want. But they were quite big, imposing characters. They were very good at fighting because that was their life. If they weren't fighting at home against another neighboring Viking kingdom, they were fighting abroad to make ends meet, make money. Because they're ultimately going out there as a job. So yes, they're getting glory, and yes, they're gaining like a chance to die in battle, which was important to them. But they're also trying to secure lands for their families and secure wealth to feed their families. Yeah, that's a good point.
What's everyone doing back home then?
Usually they're farming. They'll be farming, fishing, keeping. They're just
being cold all the time.
They're keeping things running. And in sort of medieval periods, they were typically left to like the old or the infirm or people that would seem too vital. So again, whilst many people go off raiding, that was kind of what men were supposed to do. If you were in a job that seemed like vital, like farming and stuff like that, then you weren't necessarily going to go off raiding. You're probably going to be at home manning your farm. And that's certainly what some of the older generation would do as well. So when you got too old for fighting and you weren't deemed useful enough, you'd stay at home and do what you need to do there.
Oh, look, he's 32 now. Best send him back home.
There was a weird
old.
thing actually. Like now we're talking about old age in Vikings, because obviously Viking period, like for them, dying in battle was very important because that meant you got to go to Valhalla. You know, that was like their heaven. And if you didn't die in battle, you died of old age or sickness or whatever it was, then you went to hell. Now, like hell's not like Christian hell. Hell is got sections. So there's a section for women and children and old people that died, where it's not as bad. It's not Valhalla, you know. It's not like drinking and eating and fighting all day, but it's not
Fighting.
Yeah, they loved that. That was all. Like, the whole point of Valhalla was that you got to go up into Odin's hall, where you would drink, eat. So you're basically getting pissed, eating your favorite food, and then you would go out and fight each other to the death. And then you would wake up the next day completely okay to go back into the hall, eat, feast, fight, eat, feast, fight. And you just kept on doing this over and over again until Ragnarok came, whereupon you'd be called upon by Odin and the gods to fight to try and stop the end of the world.
That's so cool.
It's fucking great, isn't it? Like, you can understand why these guys went around fighting all the time. Because if that's your payoff, if that's like where you want to go, like, man, you're going to be running in there, screaming, fighting. And again, there's a lot to say about like not fearing death as well. Like,
So what about all the women then? Do they go to hell?
Yes, so they would go to hell, but it would be an amicable area.
Not bad, am I right, boys?
No, they would go to, so the women and children and those that didn't die in battle but weren't necessarily bad people would go to a part of hell where it was it's not like you're not getting tortured all the time and stuff. It wasn't as great fun as Valhalla. It was an all right
Are you
afterlife.
Cooking for Valhalla?
I don't know. I hope not. I don't know.
You're fermenting the beer
again,
and cooking all the food for...
We're talking about like women, but not all women were at home. Like, you know, they were out fighting as well. Like there was lots of, because again, whether that was because they actually just took up the profession to become Vikings as well and went out to be these famed shield maidens that we hear a lot about in the sagas and stories, or whether they were just the families coming along. Because that's the thing, when the Vikings went over, they obviously planned to settle and take the land, so they were bringing their families with them.
Yeah.
So
There must have been some.
They're not going to turn their nose up as another person that can swing a sword or swing an axe. It doesn't matter what your gender is.
Every person is a soldier.
Yeah, so the idea that only men fought is not true. There are accounts and stories about women fighting as well. In fact, the angels of their religion, essentially, that went to the battlefield and took people to Valhalla, they were women. They were the Valkyries.
The Valkyries, yeah.
So the gender roles in Viking culture were far less rigid and far less stingent as some of the other Christian cultures.
More progressive.
At the time. Yeah, they were.
That's pretty
In fact, when you got married, it was the woman that owned the housestead. Like, you didn't own it. So you got married and, you know, your job as a man was to go and like, you know, provide for it and stuff. And you got a wife and you got kids and she would look after the home and stuff like that. But if you fucked up, she owned the house. She had the recourse to like go, well, fuck off. Like, she had the keys and stuff. So you couldn't be a bastard. I mean, they probably were. There's definitely
no dueling
standards.
back then. No, like.
Oh yeah, there was dueling.
Okay.
We talked about dueling.
We talked about
Ivy
dueling.
and the.
I was going to say, did they not be like,
Ganger.
right, get your bloody sock out?
Oh, that was way later, different times. But yeah, but no, yeah. So again, I think certainly in gender roles, the Viking period was more progressive than other cultures around it. But also, I feel like again, we don't know necessarily enough about gender, like women in history, because of the people that recorded it not recording them. So it's a tough one. But no, so women were out fighting as well as men. If you watch the Viking show, you've got Lagertha, who's in the show, but she was also deemed to be like an actual real Viking woman, a shield maiden. And so she went off.
I've never watched the show.
Yeah, you haven't. And it's a good thing, really. It's not. It's a great show. You should definitely watch it. But if we watched it together, we would.
I can't get into it, things like that. There's too many series now. They're all an hour each.
Oh, they're so good, though.
Yeah,
and they have
but
the
I
best
just don't
Vikings in it. And again, they take liberties with the stories, But there are loads of awesome Vikings in there. So Ragnar Lothbrok, or Ragnar Hairy Breeches, he was
You just sound like you're mumbling words now.
Ragnar Lothbrok,
Ragnar Lothbrok.
or famously known as Ragnar Hairy Breeches, because apparently he wore very hairy trousers.
Him or Mr. Him?
So he was, again, he's in the sagas, but he's not necessarily... Historically, did he exist? Maybe. Or possibly his stories are several different sort of rulers or leaders from the Scandinavian countries combined into one character. And he was like, he was one of the guys, he invaded England, he did all that, he invaded Northumbria, and would ultimately meet his end in a pit of snakes, because the king of Northumbria was like, fuck you, I'm going to murder you in this pit of snakes. And he drops him in a pit of snakes and he gets vipered.
Oh, I thought you were going to be like, yeah, little did he know, they were all just grass snakes. They didn't harm him.
Yeah.
No harm was done.
No harm was done.
He just slowly withered away.
And died whilst trying to eat snakes. No, so that was what he did.
They're like proper vipers, like, you're dead.
Yeah, but then...
Ain't no anti-venom for you been invented yet, bitch.
And then... But then you had like actual, we know historical characters who did exist, who were supposedly the sons of Ragnar. So Ivar the Boneless, Uber, as we mentioned earlier, Bjorn Ironside, absolute lad. Love Bjorn Ironside. He's one of my faves. He's one of my favorites in the show because it's a great show, but he's also one of my favorites in history because I shit thee not. He decides, right, I'm going to go and sort of sail south and I'm going to go raiding. And he raids parts of
by
France.
himself?
No, with a bunch of lads, bunch of mates.
There's 12 of them.
They wouldn't have been too many. They were like, these were smaller bands of people. But anyway, they probably had loads of ships. Oh, who am I lying? Anyway, he goes down south. He starts raiding along the coast of France and that sort of stuff. And he eventually gets to Italy and he's enjoying this. And he's like, Rome's meant to be a pretty sick town. I'm going to go and raid Rome. And so he goes and fights Rome and he's not getting anywhere with it. And he's like, it sucks. Like, Rome's beating my ass, but I really want the stuff in it because it's really cool.
Oh, they've just got a lot of cool shit.
They've got a lot of cool shit in Rome. Like, it seems like a legit town. I want to go and like go large in it. And they won't let me in.
Also, it's warm. I want a holiday.
Yeah, he wants to go in there. He wants to sort of try the wines. He wants to go and get the good food. And they're being really inconsiderate, the Romans. They're like, we don't want you Vikings in here.
Dickheads,
because we know what you do. You raid.
We've heard of your time.
And then so Bjorn's obviously forced to try and attack the city, right?
You've got no choice, really.
You haven't. The Romans didn't give him a choice. So he tries to attack it, and it doesn't go well because obviously Rome's a big city, it's well defended, and he's like, fuck, this isn't going well. How are we going to do this? And so he comes up with a plan, and that plan...
F-22 fighter jets.
Drones.
He wins... and that's the story of the guy.
Arguably, the real story is even cooler, right? So he goes and he basically sends a letter to the defenders of Rome, and he says,
"The defenders of Rome."
The defenders of Rome, and he says, "Mate, I'm really sick, and I'm dying.
Please let me in.
Can you like?" I want to convert to Christianity. Like, could you just like send a guy over to deal with it?
Breaths.
So
I want to be Christian.
He supposedly gets converted to Christianity.
Psych, motherfucker! Swords out.
Kind of.
Really?
So yeah. So and then he tells them that he's died.
I'm dead. Just to let you know, I died. All right,
guys, I'm dead. I'm dead. Anyway, so he lets them know that he's died.
Now,
and he requests that they give him a Christian funeral and a Christian procession because he wanted to die and go to heaven into God. And so him and a small retinue of his men are let into the city with his dead body, and they take him inside.
Body is dead.
Yeah, they take him inside and like, right, we're going to give you a nice Christian burial. And then he's like, aha, fuck faces. And he like bursts up. I'm alive. He's like, he gets all these axes like and weapons out and he just fucking goes ham like and kills everyone and takes over the city like that. And I'm just like, no, that can't be real. That can't be real. He didn't actually do that and he fucking did. And that is why Bjorn Ironside is my favourite Viking of all time.
That's
Plus,
like-
his name is like...
That's like Troy levels.
It is. It's like Troy levels of
Although
cool.
Troy was a bit shit. It's like, why do we want this big fucking horse?
Yeah, to be fair, that was
Like,
a bit dumb.
Yeah. Like,
Like, if my...
why are we wheeling this thing in? It's just clearly got loads of people in it.
Yeah, I can hear them breathing.
Like, it's fucking heavy, man. Like, what have you got in here?
Jesus Christ, why did it sound like there's a bunch of Greek soldiers in this horse?
At least that one's a bit more plausible. Oh yeah, he looks dead. No one bothered to check his pulse though.
I don't know, I don't think so.
maybe-
That'd be a bit rude.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
respect the
don't
dead
wanna-
and
yeah,
stuff.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I guess in that time you'd be a bit more
Yeah,
superstitious around that kind of stuff, wouldn't you?
absolutely. But yeah, he goes and does that. What a mad
That's-
lad.
That's brilliant. I love him.
He's great. He's so good. And his
Why isn't there films about that? That's what I want to know. I bet there is, isn't there? I bet
I
they're
don't-
old. I bet they're older. I bet they're from like 1950s and like. the
Yeah, to be
acting's a
fair,
bit
there
shit.
were a lot of old
And-
Viking films. But actually, the old Viking films were probably better than the new Viking films in historical accuracy terms because they were actually they actually listened and they were like, right, well, because they didn't have preconceptions of what Vikings had to look like, bar from horned on helmets. So horns on helmets is complete horse shit. They never had horns on their helmets.
Oh what?
I know. When
That's my
everyone thinks of a
favourite
Viking, they think of a
flair.
Viking with a horned helmet, and they didn't have that. The only reason that
Yeah, you think of the like Saxon type helmet with the, which is I guess sort of like a, yeah, but like a cup, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've just got the horns coming out the side.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the helmet itself, fairly straightforward. Just take the horns off and you pretty much got yourself the right helmet. They're typically, like a bowl that sits on the head, usually with a nose guard to come down to protect the face.
yeah.
Sometimes they would have mail that they could pull around the bottom of the helmet as well to keep the neck and chin a little bit more protected. If you had more money, you might have something that has like cheek
Wasn't-
guards and all sorts. So
Am I wrong?
Mhm.
The nose bridge thing.
Mhm.
Surely you'd like smack your nose against that and break your nose a bunch of times. Surely that's a design
No.
flaw.
no, because the helmet's strapped very tightly to the head, so it won't move.
Okay.
So when something clouts into it, you might get a bit of a bump, but it's better.
But
than
you're a fucking Viking, so you shake it
but
off. And
It's
like,
better than having an axe through your fucking noggin, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
And admittedly, spears and stuff could find their gaps in the helmets and things like that, and arrows, but they were really good protection, and they're really good protection because they wouldn't have kept on wearing them if they weren't. So they're
True. Yeah. By the way, lads, this
helmet's useless. I keep
fucking
breaking my
guff.
nose.
Everyone's dying. Like,
Yeah.
Everyone's breaking their faces.
It seems very
cheekbones.
expensive for something that doesn't do what it says on the tin. But yeah, so it's a crazy one. But yeah, so my favourite Viking, Bjorn Ironside. What a lad. But I think we've been waffling on long enough. So probably bring it to an end.
Yeah, we've given a brief overview. We've
Yeah.
done a lot. Well, I feel like we've touched upon.
Yeah, we have. Although I suppose we should just sum it up with the end of the Viking era.
All of
With
the Viking area.
another sound Viking lad, Harold Fairhair. Why was he called Fairhair? Some people say it's because he was blonde. Some people say it's because he just had a sick cut. No one really knows. But anyway, he ends up basically uniting all of Scandinavia and he becomes like the first king of like all those Scandinavian areas. And when that happens, like
Everyone went, well, we're bored of this place now.
yeah,
Let's fuck off back home.
so he becomes the king. They've still got lands over in England and stuff. So he ends up, well, actually no, he doesn't. I don't think. By this point, I think England had kind of taken back everything, and he tries to lead one last raid to reclaim it all at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, and he dies, gets killed. He's not successful, but what he does do, unbeknownst probably to him at the time, is he weakens the English army so that when they go and fight the Battle of Hastings, like literally like days, not days, weeks later, like they get fucked by the Normans. But anyway, that's kind of where it ends. And also like Christianity starts to seep in and the paganism starts to die away. And so there's like, it's not cool to be a Christian and continue raiding other Christian countries and shit like that. And it also just sort of fizzles out and then starts becoming the medieval period. Although arguably it's already the medieval period, but you know what I mean. But yeah, and that's kind of where it all comes to an end in 1066. The height of the
That's
Vikings.
mad. It just
Go on.
sort of like fizzles out.
Yeah, but I mean, this is happening over years and years. Obviously, like it's not happening in a
guess
matter
isn't
of weeks or days.
Yeah, it's not like one.
One day it just happens.
Yeah.
It does take some time, but yeah, and the whole sort of raidy, scary Viking thing sort of.
Is there anything we missed? I mean,
there's loads we've missed. There's loads we missed, and like there's loads of cool like characters that we might have mentioned but not really gone into about their story.
characters.
Okay, not characters, people, historical individuals. You know that we've missed, and there's loads of stories and sagas, and we've only really touched upon like their arms and armor, like briefly. We only touched upon their culture briefly. We only touched upon like their fashions and stuff. So there's loads of stuff we could talk about more. In fact, one thing I would like to talk about more would have been like the Great Heathen Army and the sort of those invasions into England and that whole saga between King Alfred and Ivar the Boneless and Guthrum and all these like badass sort of characters, you know, because that's kind of the story of how England becomes arguably England, because Alfred the Great is argued, although disputed, as the first king of England, as England. Before it was all like Wessex and different sort of kingdoms, but yeah, so arguably the first king of England as we would understand it. But yeah, so
This is when a lot of other historians are going to be like,
arguably is the word that we must remember in that sentence.
Hear that, listeners? Arguably.
Please
don't at us.
Yeah, it is disputed, and there are many other things that other characters and people that say were the first. But he was also one of the only two, or one of the only ones to be called the Great as well, which is a pretty cool title to have. I think there was another king called Canute later down the line, and he was also great apparently. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, King Alfred's brilliant, really cool character, definitely worth revisiting. And we should definitely do an episode about that invasion of the Great Heathen Army, you know. I mean, when you've got like King Alfred the Great on one side and a guy called Ivar the fucking Boneless on the other, you know you're in for a good ride. So we'll definitely look into that in more detail in the future. But I think as a general overview and introduction to Vikings and stuff, I think it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, so I think like most of them, it's going to be a brief introduction.
Yeah.
There's no real structure to these.
As of
it's
yet.
Just
talk about shit I know and you find interesting.
Yeah, and then in the future, I definitely think we could delve into any one particular person within the Viking period and probably spend a whole 45 minutes, hour talking about them.
Literally.
But no, there'll be future episodes for sure.
Yeah, we're in this for the long haul. We've got to keep.
You know what?
Gotta
I
keep
think
the
we're
content
bitten off more
going.
than we can shoot. I think there's too much history.
There is a lot of history, and
I can barely remember what I did yesterday.
yeah,
Let alone read up on what a bunch of people did a few thousand years ago. Like,
yeah, but they're cool. They're cool people, man.
yeah, I mean they are. Yeah,
It's cool stories, man. It's cool stories, bro. But yeah, cool. Well, that was fun, I think, and we'll find out.
Yeah, we haven't recorded one in
a while, so that was a bit slow going.
Yeah, we're kind of just
meandering.
Also, you know what it's like, middle of COVID pandemic. We're in a bubble. We're fine. But
you're brain dead.
Yeah, you've
been staring at the same four walls for the past 4 or 5 months.
We're trapped inside. The pub's only open tomorrow.
Oh, I'm so excited.
So yeah, you kind of just go, how do I talk to people?
How do I talk to people?
How do I talk to my best friend?
What?
I've forgotten.
What did I remember from the thing? But yeah, so with that said, it's been really fun, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Yeah, I don't know what the next one's going to be.
Well, they'll find out.
We're going to, for you listeners, it'll be 2 weeks. That's if you follow us religiously at this point, which I
doubt you
anyone
do.
are. But for you, it'll be 2 weeks. For us, it'll be 5 minutes. So, yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Right. Catch you in a bit.
I'll catch you in a bit.
Bye.
Bye.